This is the review for the semester exam, problem number 11. So in problem number 11, it says solve the following inequalities, write the solution in interval notation, then graph the solution sets. So there's two different things happening in these two different problems. For A, there is a less than symbol, and for B, there is a greater than symbol. Both of them are absolute value problems. So when there's a less than symbol, you write what is called a compound inequality. So to do that, you take the opposite of 5, which is a negative 5. And you say a negative 5 is less than. You drop the absolute value signs, so x minus 3, which is less than 5. Now you want to isolate the x, so you can add 3 to all three parts of this inequality. It's called a compound inequality again. And we get a negative 2 is less than x, which is less than 8. That's the algebraic solution. Now let's do the graphical solution. So we draw a number line. And on the number line, we only need the two numbers. So the negative 2 is first, and then the positive 8. All right, now, since it's a less than and not a less than or equal to, then that means it gets parentheses instead of a bracket. So for our answer, we're going to put parentheses on the negative 2 and the 8. Since the x is sitting in between, what do I mean sitting in between? Looky, negative 2's here, 8's here, the x is sitting in between them. Then you shade in between. So we need parentheses. We need parentheses on the negative 2 and parentheses on the 8. And we shade in between the negative 2 and the 8, and there's the graphical solution. Now for the interval notation solution, the interval notation solution looks very much like the graphical solution. You put parentheses, which notice that's the first thing you see on the graph, parentheses, negative 2, comma, 8, and parentheses, and there's the interval notation. All right, let's go to B. When it's a greater than or equal to sign, you have to write two separate inequalities. So the first one is a negative 2x plus 5 is greater than or equal to 11, or the second one is a negative 2x plus 5. You flip the symbol around, you make it less than or equal to, and instead of 11, you put a negative 11. All right, now let's solve them. For the left one, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I get a negative 2x is greater than or equal to 6. Divide both sides by a negative 2. But don't forget, when you divide by a negative number, you've got to flip that sign around so it's x is less than or equal to a negative 3. All right, let's go solve the other one. Subtract 5 from both sides. You get a negative 2x is less than or equal to a negative 16. Divide both sides by a negative 2. When you divide an inequality by a negative number, you have to flip the sign around. So we get x is greater than or equal to a negative 8. And we're ready to graph it. So this should be a positive 8 because I had a negative 16 divided by a negative 2, which is a positive 8. All right, so we are ready to graph it. So when we graph it, on my number line, I put the smallest number first, which is the negative 3, and then the larger number, which is the positive 8. Now, when you make a compound inequality, you shade in the middle. When you make two separate inequalities, you shade going outwards. So we put a bracket, gets a bracket instead of a parentheses this time because it was greater than or equal to. And then we shade to the left of the negative 3, and we shade to the right of the positive 8. There's the graphical solution, and now we need the algebraic solution, the interval notation. And how far left does this pink line goes? It goes to negative infinity. It stops at negative 3, bracket, union, picks back up at 8 and goes through infinity, and there's your algebra, your interval notation.